I've always had this saying that I'm my own best entertainment and audience. And that's because I can just, if I'm sitting in an office waiting for the doctor or something, I can just be doing whatever in my imagination and just enjoy my time there. And that's something, kind of as a side note, as a parent, I've had to learn not everyone can do that apparently, which is new information to me, fairly new.
Join the Discovering Your Mind Facebook group and enjoy discussions, ask questions, and participate in the podcast in fun and unique ways. Aphantasia is a condition characterized by an inability to visualize mental images in one's mind. If you have just discovered that you or someone you love has aphantasia, or if you're just fascinated by the subject in general and love learning more about it, you are in the right place. The Discovering Your Mind podcast delves into all aspects of the mind's eye, including aphantasia, hyperphantasia, and everything in between. Welcome to the Discovering Your Mind podcast, brought to you by shanesbraindomain.com. I am your host, Shane Williams, also known as Shane's Brain, and today we're talking with the one and only Matthew Bockholt, who I just met recently. He was referred to me by a mutual friend, and we're happy to have him. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. All right. So to start out, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do for a living and what you like to do for fun and those sorts of things?
Well, currently I am writing. I am unpublished as of yet as an author, but I am considering how to best publish. With the way the industry is going, things are changing a lot between traditional and self-publishing right now. So
We're
kind of in a weird period. So I'm working on a series of 4 books right now, and 2 of them are finished, and I'm well on my way on the 3rd one. And before that, I was in IT. I did that for many years. I worked in the video game industry mostly, and always been a big gamer. So I like to play video games a lot. And a lot of other hobbies as well, but that's my main one.
Okay. What types of books are you writing? These are novels, right?
Yeah, novels, fiction, currently young adult, kind of a romance with some urban fantasy vibes and some sci-fi vibes. It's kind of a weird mixture, but...
Okay. Sounds cool. Well, good luck with that.
Thank you.
In this episode, we will be referring to what we call the Apple Graph. If you would like to view the Apple Graph to play along and better understand what we're talking about, you can find it on shanesbraindomain.com in the Aphantasia and Beyond section. If you are unable to view the Apple Graph for whatever reason, it is a graph divided into 6 sections. In the number 6 section, there is a very detailed image of a red apple. In the number 5 section, it is the same image but with less detail. Number 4 is still in color but has less detail and more basic shapes instead of detailed hues and gradients. Number 3 is the less detailed apple but in gray tones without the color. Number 2 is a simple outline of the apple. And number 1 is blank, indicating no visualization whatsoever. This is called aphantasia. The first thing I would like you to do is imagine a red apple in your mind. And I'm going to share my screen with you here real quick.
Okay.
All right. Which one of those best represents what you saw in your mind's eye?
Definitely number 6 best represents it, but I would say even that is not a good comparison. I could feel the hardness of the skin and kind of the waxiness of it, and almost the grainy texture. I could hold it in my hand or see it on a tree, like growing on a branch on a tree, and pluck it off.
So it was more than visual. There was also some feeling and some touch involved as well?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Now I'd like you to imagine a horse in your mind.
Okay.
Is it like looking at a picture or more of just a thought or something else?
It's more like being there with a horse. It's not a picture. It's moving, it's breathing. I can run my hand on it. I can feed it. I can hear it, smell it.
Okay. That is so cool. Was there a background or was it isolated?
At first, it was kind of just the horse in a barn, but then I imagined being out in a field with it. I can isolate it if I want. It can just be a horse alone in a void, or I can ride it.
Oh, cool. Wow, that's cool. Is the image more clear with your eyes closed or your eyes open?
I don't think it's any more clear with my eyes closed.
Okay.
It's
the same either way?
Yeah, it's not related to my vision, physical vision in any way. It's a separate thing, so doesn't affect the quality.
Would you say the horse is in your mind or is it projected out in front of you?
It's definitely in my mind. It's kind of, I think of it as like a separate universe that I have a separate eye that can look into. So it's not projected in the real world in any way.
Okay. Is the image solid or transparent?
Though I can make it transparent if I want, now that you said that. It can have kind of a ghosty appearance if I want.
And I'm assuming it sounds like it's in 3D.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Can you put a birthday hat on the horse if you want?
Yep.
If it made a sound, could you hear it in your mind?
Yes.
You are definitely hyperphantasia, I can tell already. So now I'd like you to imagine a cup on a table that you accidentally knock over.
Okay.
Okay, what type of cup was it?
It was a red plastic cup.
What about the table? What type of table was it?
It was just my kitchen table, a wood, kind of a dark wood, little bit of a glossy sheen on it.
All right. And how did the cup get knocked over?
I knocked it over with my hand.
Okay. And when it knocked over, did anything spill out of it?
No.
It was empty.
It was empty.
All right. Did the sequence appear as a video in your mind or something else?
That's probably the best description of it. It would, or maybe more like being in a VR headset.
So do you know why your mind went to the details it went to?
No, I don't. And when you ask, like, for instance, about the cup, what I imagined, that was just one of the solo cup being just one of the things that I imagined. It was the most prevalent, but it can switch and change on the fly as I'm thinking about it and imagine, and just my brain is, I guess, just conceiving of different possibilities. But the first one was a solo cup. So that's the one I spoke about, but kind of like it's changing in real time. Like the cup can flash into different types of cups as I'm thinking about it and imagining, different cups that we have in our household and what it might be that I'm knocking over. And even sometimes stuff might be spilling out.
So would you say you have control over that?
Yes.
Okay.
I can take control of it, but I can also just let it do its thing and come up with its own images.
Did this mental image also have sound? Did you hear it in your mind?
Yes, I did hear the sound of a solo cup hitting the table.
Okay.
Kind of that. And because it was empty, it was kind of an echoey plastic thunk.
Right.
But a light one because it's a light cup. So.
Right. Okay, cool. So it's very realistic, all of it.
It's extremely realistic. Yeah. I mean, I can tell the difference, obviously, because it's not in the real world. Like, I know the difference between reality and my imagination, but kind of maybe the way you'd know when you're playing a video game, it's not real. Just because it's a video game, no matter how good the fidelity, the graphics might get or the sound or whatever, you'll always know that it's not real because you're an active participant in that. It's kind of hard to describe how I know it's not real, but that's the best I can come up with.
Right. Yeah, I've heard other people describe a similar thing. So I'm curious, how long have you known about aphantasia? And before that, did you just assume everyone was like you?
So I haven't known about it very long. I first learned about it with that picture of the apple that you showed at the beginning. That kind of went around the internet for a while, I guess. And that was when I learned about it. So I didn't know beforehand. I always did assume that everyone else could at least see things in their mind. I did know that it was more intense for me than most people, just from speaking to people about dreams in particular and stuff like that. My dreams are what I would now describe as hyper realistic. It takes me, it's a split second, but there's always a split second of confusion upon waking to realize that that was a dream and not reality, just because of how realistic the dreams are. My dad always talked about his dreams growing up, and so I knew that that was unusual because he dreams kind of in black and white and doesn't have a lot of detail in his dreams.
Right.
So I knew that there was differences, but I wasn't aware of just how big a difference that could be. I did listen to a few of your podcasts because of that mutual friend you mentioned. I met her at a writing convention. I was on a panel and talking. They were just talking about where we get ideas from, and also talking about dreams. And I mentioned my ability to really see things because I'd recently learned that wasn't normal, and how I think that helps me in my writing. And so she told me about you and your podcast. So I went and listened, and it's really fascinating just to know that so many people see things differently and have different degrees of imagination.
We're going to move on to perspective visualization. So now what I'd like you to do is imagine any room. Can you imagine all four walls at once?
Yes.
Can you imagine all four walls and all four corners at once?
Yes. I can do it from first person. I can do it from more of like in any perspective, really. I can be a fly on the wall or see it from above with the roof removed, or from below with the floor removed. I can see it like in full 3D, any direction.
Can you zoom outside the room to imagine the entire exterior of the building?
Yes.
What about the entire neighborhood?
Yes.
What about the entire city?
That gets a little less clear, but yes, to some degree. I can fill in details if I want to. I can make it realistic, but as I know it's a specific place, I'm trying to imagine the actual place and only filling in the details that I know when I do that.
Okay.
But from like a helicopter view or something, I can do that with what I know of the area. But if I want to, I can fill in those missing details and make it highly detailed.
Okay. So it sounds like your mind is trying to be as accurate as possible, though.
When I want it to be, yes.
Right. Okay. But then if you don't know a specific detail, you can just fill it in with something you made up.
Yeah, and I do that all the time when writing because I'm making up, cities and worlds and areas in my mind, so I can do that.
Does effort play a role in how well you can visualize something?
Yes. For instance, the city view, right? If I'm just going off of what I know, it doesn't require a lot of effort. But if I want to be able to fill in the details, then I have to think about it and make decisions about what goes where and what kind of aesthetic buildings or city plans might have. So it does require effort to think about it. Again, I can just let my brain kind of do its own thing, but then the details aren't solid. They're kind of flashing in and out and changing.
In general, when you close your eyes, what do you see?
Just blackness.
Does it stay black for as long as you want it to, or does it begin to fill in with images?
No, because like I said previously, my imagination is like a separate universe. I see it and the blackness at the same time. It's really hard to describe using the words we have available. It's like a separate eye seeing something else somewhere else. Like if you had an eye on the back of your head and you closed your front eyes, I think you'd still see blackness with your front eyes, but see behind you with your behind eye. I don't know because I don't have one, but I'd assume I can imagine that. Funny enough,
wow.
I'm not sure how else to describe it. I mean, I do get like weird, visual artifacts from light and stuff that's normal with eyes, but I don't see visions in the blackness at all.
That's a really cool description I've never heard before. That's cool. So what about this? Is there always something visual going on in your mind? Does your visualization ever turn off?
That is one that requires focus. I can turn it off. I can visualize nothing, but it does require effort to do that.
Okay.
And that's something I've practiced a lot with meditating and stuff like that. So I've learned how to do that.
So when you're visualizing nothing, would you describe that as thinking of nothing?
Yes, as well.
Okay. So you
kind of go hand in hand. Yeah.
Okay. Very cool. If I asked you, what is your next thought? Could you tell me?
No, not until I think it.
Okay.
I don't know what I'm going to think until I think it, I'm afraid.
Okay. Does your ability to visualize vary depending on circumstances, details, and events?
Probably. If I'm more focused in the real world, then my imagination kind of shuts down, or it never like turns off unless, like I said, I'm focusing on turning it off. Like that requires its own effort, but it doesn't become prominent. It just kind of is always there doing its own thing, but it's definitely more fuzzy, less detailed. Like for instance, if I want to be able to smell or hear or feel, the visual is pretty self-reliant. It kind of does its own thing, but the other senses require me to actually think about what I'm trying to smell or taste or touch. Sound kind of does its own thing to some degree too.
Do you tend to visualize things you've already seen before, or do you tend to create new and unique images in your mind?
Probably a lot of both. I mean, thinking of totally unique things is difficult because it's hard to know where it might be pulling that, what lost thoughts or memories or pictures I've seen or books I've read that it might be pulling from.
So let's talk about the horse again.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say that that is something you created or something you pulled from a memory, or a mixture of both?
Okay. I guess I can kind of see what you're talking about. If that's what you mean, I'm definitely creating the horse. I have spent some time around horses, not, in person, but not a lot, very little. So, but I can create any kind of horse that I want to look at with different patterns or different colors of mane, different heights and sizes and weights. So yeah, I'm definitely creating the horse. It's not just a horse that I've seen before. Understanding your question now, I would say that I'm creating unique stuff the vast majority of the time.
Can you visualize to the extent that it completely takes you out of your reality?
No, other than being asleep. But if I'm conscious, I'm definitely always in reality.
All right. So when it comes to mind visualization, on a scale from 1 to 10, how much is it like actual seeing?
I mean, if there's a number above 10, I'd go above 10 probably, because it's identical. Awesome. I can't say that there's any real, other than it just not being real, and I know that, unless I'm trying to imagine something that I don't know, and then I have to fill in details and kind of build it from the ground up. But if it's something like a horse or a cup or a table or something I'm familiar with, then it's as clear as reality, I would say.
Imagine an orange on a shiny plate. Are there variations in color, tone, or surface of the orange?
There can be. Yeah.
Okay. What did you picture when I said that? Was it like a beautiful, pristine orange?
At first it was, yes. And then you started asking about color variations, and then I saw purple orange, and awesome. Which is funny, a purple orange, but spots.
That was actually one of my later questions. Can you make the orange purple?
Yes, absolutely. No problem.
That's awesome. Is there reflected illumination from the orange onto the plate?
Yeah.
Can you rotate it and see it from all angles?
Yes. Can
you imagine yourself becoming the same size as the orange and viewing it from that perspective?
Yeah.
Can you imagine going into the orange and traveling through its skin?
Okay, yeah.
You want to describe that?
Well, I had two different things going on at the same time. One was me kind of like digging into the orange and pulling the skin apart, and it's really squishy and kind of stringy, but then also the scent is extremely overwhelming because I'm the same size and I'm digging into it. And the other one was more of kind of like a ghostly, like just moving through it, but still being able to see it as if it was lit from the inside.
Really?
Yeah. But without deforming the orange in any way.
All right. Let's move on to mind audio. Do you have an inner monologue?
Yes.
Okay. What does that mean to you? Can you describe what that is and what it's like?
Yeah, I'm kind of always talking because I'm religious, I'm not only talking to myself, I'm also talking to God constantly. So he probably gets sick of hearing from me constantly. But yeah, I'm always talking to myself, thinking things through. Again, I can focus on not doing that. And that's something I've practiced a lot of too. For instance, when I'm driving specifically, I'll turn off my inner dialogue to make sure I'm focusing more on the road, if driving conditions are bad, so that all my focus is on, just driving. Otherwise, I'm kind of constantly having conversations, not only with myself, but also with the characters of my books, like characters in movies I've seen. We'll be conversing. Like it's kind of nonstop.
So would you describe that as actual audible? You're hearing it?
No, again, I guess it's like having a set of ears in another dimension that are hearing those things. I don't hear it with my physical ears at all.
But is it similar? Would you describe
very similar?
Okay, so it's similar to what you described with your visual.
Yeah, it's basically the same thing.
It's very much like reality, but it's separate.
Correct.
But it's similar. Okay. So you said that you could shut the audio off. Is that easy to do, or is that something, again, you've really worked at?
It's something that I worked. It's easy now, but it is something that took time that I had to work at and learn how to do.
Are sounds automatically attached to your visualization, or are they optional?
As I said earlier, sounds usually kind of do their own thing as well. They're usually attached. I can, again, control that and change that if I want to. I usually have a song stuck in my head, so that happens a lot to me. Okay.
So what is that like when you have a song stuck in your head? Can you describe that anymore? Like, is it...
It's really annoying.
Is that because it's like a loop that you
can't turn off? Yeah, it just keeps repeating. And that's annoying because I can turn off the voices and everything, but sometimes I just can't get those songs out. I can turn it off when I'm focusing, but as soon as I go back to doing something else where I'm not focusing on silencing it, it comes back, and I usually have to find another song to listen to get rid of it.
Okay. What about if you just want to listen to a song that you like? Can you play that in your mind?
Oh, yeah. I do that quite often, actually.
Okay. If you're doing that, if you're focusing on a particular song, can you manipulate that as well? Like, can you swap out instruments or make it sound faster, or make the singer sound higher, or make the singer sound like Yoda, or you know what I mean? Just mess with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Now I've got Yoda singing Linkin Park's "Numb" in my mind, so that's fun.
You're welcome. All right. So when it comes to mind audio, again, on the scale from 1 to 10, how much is it like actual hearing?
At 10.
All right. Imagine two people that you are close to, one man and one woman. Got it?
Yep.
Okay. Imagine the man saying, "Be careful, there's a storm coming." Can you hear that?
Yep.
Now imagine the man saying it again, but this time have him say it in the woman's voice.
Yeah.
You were able to do that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Imagine someone you were close to that has been deceased for several years. Can you hear their voice in your mind?
Yes.
Okay. Is there any more detail you could go into about that?
Sure. I imagined my grandmother, who, I'm not good with time. It's been a few years since she passed away, and she was living with my mom at the time. But before that, she lived in New Jersey, so we only rarely ever went to see her. So I kind of have scattered memories of seeing her from quite young to when she passed recently. But I can imagine her at any of those points and kind of the way her voice changed. I can hear her voice, in her later years before she passed, or in her earlier years when it was more clear.
Now I'd like you to imagine creating a brand new character in your mind, like a talking seahorse from New York. Can you assign a unique voice to that character?
Sure.
Okay. What's it sound like?
Well, he's got a New York accent, and my mind's kind of shifting between different voices to see what it likes best for a seahorse. I tried something high pitched first, but it seemed too common, too expected from a seahorse. So then I tried something really deep, and it was too New Yorky, I guess. Yeah. So I kind of went a little different ways, made a little gravelly and a little kind of medium pitch.
That is so cool how you can just play with all those variables. Yeah, that's cool. So let me ask you this: when you're writing and creating characters, is there a similar thing happening when you're creating different characters' voices?
Yeah, I can hear them in my head, and once I settle on a voice that I like, what I tend to do is I'll actually go look for voice actors on Audible, and I'll go through a bunch until I find one that most closely matches the one that I came up with, so that I can keep a link to that, just in case, as time goes by, I forget what I wanted them to sound like. I can go back and listen to that and remember, oh yeah, that's what they sound like. Okay. And I'll also find a picture of what I want them to look like, just so that as I'm going through the stories and writing, in case I forget, anytime I need to describe them, I can go back and look at that stuff. But when I'm first creating them, I play around with it a lot and settle on something that I like for the character.
A dork parade! A dork parade! The people point and gawk. It's not a dork parade, you guys. It's just our family walk. The sun is on fire. A ragtag mob of hilarious poems is available on shanesbraindomain.com and Amazon. Now I want you to imagine a chocolate chip cookie in your mind.
Okay.
All right. So you can see it, right? Mm-hmm. What about smell? Can you smell it in your mind?
Yes.
Okay. Again, on that scale from 1 to 10, how much is it like actual smelling?
Again, a 10.
I want you to imagine the cookie again, but I want you to change its smell. Can you change it to bacon?
Yep.
Okay. But the visual stayed the same.
It's
you can see the cookie, but smell bacon.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you imagine two different smells at once, such as roses at the same time as baking cookies?
Roses and baking cookies. Yes, though I don't like to. I don't like the smell of roses. But I can do it, yeah.
And it's at the same time. Now let's talk about taste. Chocolate chip cookie again. Can you taste it in your mind?
Yeah.
Okay. Scale from 1 to 10?
10.
Okay. Imagine eating a ripe cantaloupe. Can you taste it in your mind?
Yes.
Can you imagine changing its taste by adding salt?
Yeah.
Can you imagine eating an unripe cantaloupe, and does it taste different?
Yes.
Can you imagine tasting two flavors at the same time, like banana and chocolate?
Yeah.
Okay.
Those go together really good.
Yeah. What about ketchup and ice cream?
Yeah.
How was that?
That's not as good.
All right. Is your ability to taste in your mind useful when cooking?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't do a lot of cooking, but when I do, yes.
Can you mix the ingredients in your mind and build flavor profiles in your mind?
When I cook, I usually do that.
So you can taste it in your mind to determine what it will taste like in real life.
Yeah. In fact, one thing I do quite often is I'll mix different sauces together to make condiments, I should say, to make like a special kind of fry sauce or something like that. And I'll look at what we have and kind of think of what goes together. And
can tasting food in your mind satisfy a craving or a desire for the food?
To some degree, yes. It doesn't satisfy hunger, but it can satisfy a craving to some degree, yeah.
Now let's talk about touch. Again, with the chocolate chip cookie, can you experience the sense of touch? Can you feel it in your hands or in your mouth? Or
yeah, both.
Again, on the scale from 1 to 10.
Again, I'd say 10.
I want you to imagine kissing someone on the lips. Do you feel the pressure of the two lips meeting and how hard or soft it is?
Yes.
Do you feel anything else, such as the other person's breath or arms?
I can, yeah.
Do you feel the full physical location of your body in space, or do you just imagine the location of the kiss?
I can do either one.
All right, so you can feel how heavy your body is?
Mm-hmm.
Can you reach out and touch the face or hair of the person you're kissing in the mental image?
Yes.
All right, and you can feel all that?
Mm-hmm.
And do you feel the emotions associated with the kiss as well?
To some degree, yes.
Imagine that you grow an extra finger out of your hand.
Okay.
Can you feel it in the same way that you would feel your other fingers?
Yeah.
That's crazy. So can you touch it with your other fingers?
Yeah, sure.
And you can bend it and everything?
Uh-huh. I can bend it, flex it. I can imagine it either being, you know how when you try to just bend your pinky, you can't? Or at least I can't. Some people, I guess, probably can, but like it forces the other fingers down.
Right.
So if I imagine another finger here below it, I can imagine it being able to do its own thing, or also forcing the pinky and other fingers to go with it when I bend it.
Okay, that is really cool. In this episode, we will be referring to what we call the nature picture. If you would like to view the nature picture to play along and better understand what we're talking about, you can find it on shanesbraindomain.com in the Aphantasia and Beyond section. If you are unable to take a look at the nature picture, it is a picture of a grove of tall trees with the sun shining brightly through the trees. There is a blue camping chair next to a peaceful flowing river with a campfire nearby. I'd like you to take a look at that nature picture that I sent you. You have that handy?
Okay. Yep. I've got it here.
Okay. Can you put yourself in that picture?
Oh, yeah.
Can you see yourself there, or is it more like you are there?
What's the difference? What do you mean, see myself there or I am there?
The reason I ask it that way is because, again, I never know exactly what people are going to say. And I kind of like it that way because everybody's so unique that it's going to mean something different to everybody. So, for example, some people I've interviewed, they visualize differently with their eyes open than their eyes closed. They can do it both ways, but it's different. They'll almost like do like a Photoshop copy and paste of themselves and just stick it in the fridge, right?
That's funny.
But then when they close their eyes, they can actually go there and experience it on a more realistic level. So that's one example, but you know, whatever it means to you.
Okay, let me tell you what went through my head when you asked that question, because I wasn't sure what you were asking. So I can both visualize seeing this scene with my own eyes from this perspective, you know, as if I'm standing in the place where this picture was taken, so I can see that exact scene, right? And I can turn my head and look around and see the rest of it, see parts that aren't in the picture. Or I can imagine seeing myself sitting in the chair, you know, enjoying the forest. Or I can imagine sitting in the chair and seeing the scene from that perspective as well, and getting up and wandering around. I can really go there and see all of it, hear all of it, smell all of it. Yep. Okay,
so you can walk around and explore the area.
Yep, I can hear the campfire crackling and kind of smell the smoke a little bit and hear the water running. And
can you feel the sun on your skin or feel the wind in your hair?
The breeze. Yep.
Okay. So you mentioned the river real quick. You said you could hear the river.
Mm-hmm.
What about if you put your hands in it? Could you feel that?
Yeah, I'd actually already done that a couple of times in my imagination. Yep. Awesome. Tried feeling the coolness and the pressure of the water as it runs, you know, through my fingers and pushes on my hand a little bit, and kind of the sliminess of the water because it looks like it's kind of a slower river. So
man, the detail that you can experience, stuff I've never heard before. That's really cool. Well, nobody else has ever answered 10 to all of those questions. Really? I've interviewed other people with hyperphantasia, but nobody quite like you, honestly. So
I'd love to say it's all good, but it's not. I mean, when I was really young, I had really terrible nightmares because of just how realistic my dreams could get. And yeah, it was pretty terrifying. Like I had to seriously learn how to not only control my imagination, but how to let it go as well, especially upon waking from dreams, how to just not hold on to those visuals and the emotions as well.
That's actually one of my later questions is, what are the upsides to this and what are some of the downsides? So since you brought it up, let's talk about that real quick. Can you identify some of those upsides and then any downsides other than the nightmares and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I think the upsides are probably pretty obvious. I can imagine anything I want at any time. I've always had this saying that I'm my own best entertainment and audience. And that's because I can just, if I'm sitting in an office waiting for the doctor or something, I can just be doing whatever in my imagination and just enjoy my time there. And that's something kind of as a side note, as a parent, I've had to learn not everyone can do that apparently, which is new information to me, fairly new. And so, trying to understand that my kids might not have the same level of patience as I do because they don't necessarily have that same degree of freedom that I just always have available to me. So I think it's important to be aware that not everyone can do that stuff. And that's another, I guess we'll talk about the upsides first still. Another upside is I think it really helps me create worlds and characters for my writing. And all of these things are both, they're a two-sided coin. They're both positives and negatives. Because the people that I create for my stories, they're so real to me that it can be difficult to, that's a good way to put it. If I'm like the bad things that are happening to them in the book, it affects me and I'm on an emotional level. Like I feel bad for my characters when I make bad things happen to them, but at the same time, I know what it will turn them into, right? Because that's kind of the idea of most character-driven stories is that their negative experiences will create a better person in the end. And perhaps that understanding also helps me on my religious side. I know a lot of people have troubles with, the question of how can God let bad things happen if he's such a good person? But being, in a sense, a God myself to these very real characters that I've created, real to me anyway, I can kind of understand that in a different way than I think some other people might be able to because of how real it is to me. I would say probably the biggest negative is if you don't learn to control it. And luckily I did. And I'm glad that I did because, again, you've got a free universe there for you to do whatever you want with. And I think that for some people that could be a real trap to maybe perhaps even get stuck in that universe or to see the real world as less valuable because you can't change it, you can't alter it, you can't do whatever you want with it. I'm grateful, I guess, for the circumstances of my youth that taught me to learn how to control my imagination and master it, so that I guess so it didn't control me to some degree, at least emotionally, if nothing else.
That is really insightful and stuff I'd never thought of before. All right. This one may be hard for you to answer based on what you've told me, but out of the five senses, which one is the most prominent or powerful in your mind?
Well, I guess I would say visual just because it kind of does its own thing, and probably sound is really close up to there with it. They're all equally realistic, but they don't all, like I said earlier, they don't all necessarily just kind of form on their own.
Right.
Smells and tastes specifically, unless, someone like you, if I'm conversing with you and you mention something, I might then taste and smell it. But otherwise, it doesn't just pop up on its own out of nowhere.
Okay. All right, let's talk about reading. When you read a novel, is it like a movie in your mind or something else?
It's very much like a movie in my mind, or again, probably closer to like wearing VR headset and being there.
Okay.
In fact, that makes me really, I can read quickly if I'm like reading manuals or, technical documents. But the second I start reading fiction, I slow way down because I'm imagining everything happening as it's happening on the page. And so like I'll even pause for pauses, in the scene. So I read really slow when I read fiction.
So how well can you visualize the characters and the surroundings? How realistic is it?
As realistic as I want it to be.
If you're creating a character based on the description in the book, does it depend on how descriptive they are? Like, how well can you develop this character? Can you see like details like hues in the skin, or the tonal in the hair, or the individual strands of hair, or the wrinkles in the skin? Like, how detailed is it?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because that was something I meant to mention with the pros and cons that I got sidetracked and forgot about. With my writing, I have a friend who's more on the aphantasia side, who's also a writer, and we were discussing this recently, and he was talking about how he struggles with putting details into his story because he doesn't imagine them, and so he struggles with how to put them in and how to describe things. And it's funny because I'm on the opposite end, but have the same problem for the opposite reason. Like, because I see things so perfectly, it doesn't occur to me to need to describe every little thing. And so, but at least when I want to, it's there. I can see it and find the words for it. So it's a little different for me, at least in that respect. But when I'm reading, if I will add whatever details the story will give me, but I'll make up the rest. So yes, I can see them very, very realistically, and what they're wearing, whatever details the writer gives me, I can put in there. And
so when you're reading, do you hear the sounds and voices in your mind as well?
Yes. And I would say oftentimes that the other senses come into effect as well. When I'm reading, when I'm actually in the world, I can smell and hear and feel things, and yeah.
Okay. Is there any narration that happens in your mind when you read? Do you actually hear someone narrating?
No, I do not. I probably could, but that's never occurred to me to actually hear the narrator.
Okay. What about audiobooks? Do you like audiobooks?
I do, mainly because of the speed problem. So I really enjoy reading. I would prefer reading over listening, except for, again, I read really slowly when I'm reading fiction. Whereas with audio, I actually listen, just in general, I listen to everything at 2 times speed. Okay. And so I can get through a book much, much quicker with an audiobook. It's definitely different though. I'm not doing the same degree of imagining when I'm listening as I do when I'm reading. But although that's really a choice, because I'll usually be listening as I'm doing other things. And so the focus isn't there. But if I do just listen without doing other things, then I can imagine it the same.
What does the phrase "the book was better than the movie" mean to you?
Because I'm a storyteller, and kind of always have been my whole life, I also really enjoy movies as well, though. And so sometimes when I hear the phrase "the book was better than the movie," I just assume the movie was poorly written. Or not that the book did something that the movie couldn't do. That's kind of a given. Books can definitely do things that movies can't. And that's always going to be the case. But that doesn't mean that the movie can't be as good as the book. It's just they're different mediums, and so you have to approach them differently. And I think there have been some recent great examples of that. Lord of the Rings is a good one. Sure, you're going to get different things out of the book than you do the movie, but the movie was done correctly for a movie because it's a different medium. That I think that it's as good as the book for its medium, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah.
And I've actually had some circumstances where I felt the other way around. So,
right. Well, that's how I always feel. Like I don't even.
I'm sure.
I don't even read books because I can't.
I guess that makes sense because you're like, what? These are just words.
Yeah, it's words on a page. You give me the movie every time.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's really interesting. I hadn't even thought of that. Yeah, for me, I can separate them as different mediums and have different expectations for them. So
Yeah, that's very insightful. I appreciate that. All right, let's move on to sleep and dreams. We've already talked a little bit about some of these, but let's go through them. What do you do to fall asleep?
So I have a chronic condition, and so I'm basically always very tired, and I can at any time just lay down and close my eyes and sleep pretty much any time, even if there's other stuff going on. But if I'm having troubles falling asleep, then I'll do one of those things that I mentioned. I'll either just start imagining something in my head, some kind of scene from a book I'm writing or a game I played, or just make up something new. And then I'll usually fall asleep very quickly as my imagination just kind of takes over and I fall into it. Or I'll play a calm song in my head to just relax me and empty out my brain. Because sometimes trying to think of a scene isn't helpful, because then I'm like into the scene and trying to figure out what's going on, and then I want to write it. And so that's not always helpful. And so sometimes a song is better just to imagine, a calm, quiet song playing, and then I'll drift off pretty quickly. So, but I usually don't have troubles falling asleep.
Okay, very cool. How vivid and detailed are your dreams?
Extremely, yeah. Like I said, weird things can still happen in my dreams, and I'm not lucid in my dreams pretty much ever. I think I could probably count on one hand the number of times I've realized I'm dreaming and become lucid, because I'm too invested in them because of how realistic they are. Even if silly, nonsensical things are happening in the dream, they make sense, and I'm invested in it. And so,
right.
And so when I wake up, there's always at least a split second of, wait, where am I? What's going on? Where did the zombies go? Whatever. I dream quite often, very action-packed dreams. A lot of zombie survival stuff, probably because I played too many zombie survival games. But yeah.
Okay. Are your dreams in first person or third person?
Usually first person, but sometimes third. Sometimes I'm not even in the dream at all.
Really? Can you describe that? What's that like?
Well, it's like watching a movie, or just experiencing scenes that you're there for. You're like the camera, not a character in it.
Okay, that's cool.
That's rare, but it does happen.
Is your dream experience different from how you visualize when you're awake?
I would say yes, just because it feels so real. When I'm awake, I can tell the difference between my imagination and reality, but in my dream, I can't until I've woken up. It feels completely real. So I'd say it's different.
Okay. How well can you remember your dreams?
Depends on the dream. I usually don't try to remember them because I don't have a need to. Sometimes I'll have a more profound dream, and those I can remember, still even years later.
Let's talk about memory. If you want to recall a memory, can you see it in your mind?
Yes.
Does it feel like you're reliving the memory or just watching it, or something else?
Either one. I can do either one.
Is there emotion attached to your memories?
If I allow there to be, yes, there can be.
How would you describe how your mind stores information?
Oh, geez, I have no idea. I don't visualize my mind storing information at all.
Okay. Do you associate your mind with an area or a space?
No. Like I said, other than the best description I can give it is like a separate universe. It's like a parallel universe that I have complete control over.
There's no rooms or compartments or anything like that?
No.
So what does the phrase search your mind mean to you? Can you search your mind? And what's it like?
I guess I'd have to know what I'm searching for. When you say that, images of like looking through a filing cabinet or something comes up, but that's just because you're talking about searching. That's not what I do when I search my mind. I just like thoughts just go through it. Like if you were to say, search your mind for your favorite TV show, then I'd just start thinking of the different TV shows. They're just flashing through really quickly and different scenes that I liked.
Right. You just think of something and it's there.
Yeah.
Does how you visualize affect how you perform in your career and your hobbies? And I want to talk specifically about your storytelling.
I definitely feel like I'm doing more storytelling than story creating, like, because my imagination does its own thing most of the time. Even if I come up with an idea, an idea occurs to me, I guess I should say, usually my imagination kind of just takes it and starts running with it and goes different directions, and I can see what I like and don't like. Usually when I write a story, at least so far, I haven't written a lot, but the few that I have written, what I do is there's usually a scene that I have imagined that is a powerful moment, and it's usually the climax of the story, right? It's that most powerful moment in the story, and that's usually what I write first. So I'll write the climax first because that is the most powerful moment of the story. That's kind of what the whole thing's building towards. And so once I have that down and I know where I'm trying to get to, then I'll go back and write the beginning of the story, like where the story starts. And then I just connect the dots. So if I'm trying to write chapter 4, I may not know what's going to happen in chapter 4, but I know that it's got to get me closer to the climax. And so usually in the shower or at night when I'm falling asleep, I'll be imagining different things that might happen in chapter 4. And that's not a lot of effort for me. It's usually just letting my imagination do its own thing. The characters are there. They're trying to deal with what's happened so far and trying to find a way forward. And they have their own personalities and their own beliefs and goals. And so they kind of act on their own. And sometimes I have to, bring it back. Like, let's refocus. We're trying to get to this point in the story, not create a new point to get to. So sometimes there's a little bit of wrangling to be done. But for the most part, the books kind of write themselves, and I just kind of write type what I'm seeing and have seen. So.
Okay. That's why I wanted you to talk about that, because I've heard authors say that almost like the book just wrote itself. Wrote itself. The characters have their own minds and they do what they want. And sometimes do you ever find yourself even like fighting with your characters?
Oh yeah. I was going to say, in the industry, there's a word called pantser, which a lot of people don't like. It's writing by the seat of your pants, right? Just making up stuff as you go. Right. And then there are plotters. So there's pantsers and plotters. The plotters are people who write down every plot point and know exactly what's going to happen where. And so they're writing according to a schedule, more or less. I'm definitely in the pantser category because, and as I think about it, and as I learn more about Aphantasia and Aphantasia, I wonder if that's the difference, the main difference between plotters and pantsers, because, a plotter doesn't have the characters doing their own thing necessarily in their mind. And so they have to figure out what the characters are doing themselves. Whereas the pantsers are like, come back here, guys. We gotta get back on point. We gotta actually focus on the story that's trying to be told here. And so if I plot too much, I do a little bit. Usually what I'll do is, again, I'll write that first. The first thing I'll write is the climax, and then I'll write the beginning so I know where we start and where we end. And then what I'll do is I'll kind of write a single sentence summary of what I want each chapter to accomplish in between. It's very bare bones, kind of like so-and-so has to learn this in this chapter, right? And I don't know what that's going to look like, because if I have found that if I try to plot more than that, it just doesn't ever work out. I end up just breaking things because the characters do their own thing. If I try to force the characters to do something, they will do something else, and it'll always be better than whatever I had planned. Every time I'm like, okay, in this chapter they need to do this, and I'll start writing it, and they're like, no, I don't want to do that. I want to do this. This is the way my personality works, and this matches my goals better. And I'm like, you're right, you are. It's just every time, if I try to plot too much, it just ends up being wasted time because they know what they want better than I know what they want. And that goes back to that whole, that they're very real to me, even though I know that they're not real. Like there's that separation between reality and fantasy that I have, but they are as real as a real thing can be, I guess, is the best way to say that. But
yeah, that is so cool. Did you do well in school or did you struggle?
a little bit of both, depended on the subject. I oftentimes got bored in school. I liked to learn on my own, so a lot of the subjects I already knew a lot about. Sometimes I don't mean to sound proud or boastful or anything, but a lot of times I would go into classes and know more than the teacher knew on the subject, just because it was one that I was interested in, and so I would learn about it. But the classes that I didn't have any interest in, I just didn't do well because I just didn't care. So it was kind of a mix of the two, where either I cared, in which case I was going to ace it because I already knew everything, or I didn't care, in which case I struggled to keep up good grades because I just didn't care to learn it or put in the effort. So
okay. Do you think your visualization and the way your mind works, do you think that played a role at all in schooling?
maybe in specific classes, like I took an architectural design class in high school, and I imagine it probably helped me in that one quite a bit, just because I could see what I wanted to make, and that was one thing that I was very interested in early in life. I actually was very I thought about becoming an architectural designer. So that was one of those classes, like by the end of the class, and some teachers were really good. That was one of my good teachers. He recognized my interest, and he basically had me teaching the class by the end of the year. That was probably helpful there. But for the most part, I can't imagine that it was terribly useful for most things. I mean, English was another one that I did really well in because I liked writing and storytelling and all that kind of stuff. So I'm sure it helped there as well.
If you woke up tomorrow and had aphantasia, how do you think it would affect your life?
I'd probably cry. Honestly, I don't know. I can't. I was talking about this earlier, and I was with a friend when we were talking about aphantasia. I was like, it's the one thing I can't imagine. Like, I can't imagine not being able to imagine. Like, I can force myself to turn it off, but that's very different than not being able to turn it on. You know, that's a different thing altogether. And I can't imagine being without it. I don't even want to know what that would be like. I apologize. I'm sorry. I know you have aphantasia. You have my condolences. I don't know. I don't know how else to.
Well, for the most part, I am at peace with it because it's part of who I am.
Yeah.
But there is part of me that is extremely curious about what it would be like to. I mean, the things you've talked about today, I'm super curious about what that would be like to actually experience those things in my mind. Because again, I can't really comprehend such a thing.
Hmm. Yeah, and I really can't comprehend not being able to do it, like just not having the ability to do it.
Okay, last question. We're almost done. If you were to try to give a general description of how your mind works and what you see in your mind's eye, how would you describe it?
A mind's eye is, and maybe eye isn't appropriate. It's like a mind's body. Like I have a separate body that exists in another universe, and it has just as many senses as this one does, but it has complete control of everything that happens in that universe. If I want to, it does its own thing if I don't take over. So it's like a living universe that does its own thing all the time, but I can wrangle it if I need to and want to.
All right. I actually really like that description. That is cool. All right. Anything else that you want to say or ask before we sign off?
Nothing I can think of. This has been fun. I really appreciate it. I'm glad I could offer my perspective.
All right. Well, have a great day.
Thanks, Shane.
And we'll talk to you later.
Okay. Take care.
All right. Bye. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, follow, and engage with us, and share it with your friends and family as we continue to explore this fascinating subject. For additional information about this episode or Shane's Brain, check out the show notes. Thanks for listening to the Discovering Your Mind podcast. You are beautifully unique.